The NFL Combine is in the books, and man, did the quarterbacks put on a performance. Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud both lit it up on Saturday. And what do we think the Colts are thinking about all that? Well, let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle podcast presented by Fan Nation on SI.com. My name is Andrew Moore, and I'm joined here by my fellow writer and co host of the Horseshoe Huddle podcast, Drake Wally. Drake, I just saw you a couple of days ago because you and I were at the NFL Scouting Combine last week, taking it in, watching Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud have a day out there. How you doing, man? Are you excited yet? Are you even more excited after seeing these quarterbacks? And hopefully, maybe we'll see one in a Colts uniform in the fall.
Yeah, it was incredibly. I think that both Richardson and Stroud really didn't blow us away in the sense that it was things that we didn't expect to happen, but it also is just reassuring that when those things do happen. But yes, both of those guys absolutely showed out. It would have been nice to see Bryce Young throw, but I get it, pro day, you'll do it there. But at the end of the day, it was also really cool to just watch the wide receivers a little bit. But there were also some quarterbacks that kind of shined that I didn't expect, but definitely Stroud and Richardson are, in my opinion, who stood out the most to me.
Yeah, and I mean, those are the guys we're going to talk about. And I think a lot of people, because they got to see those guys light it up on Saturday, I mean, a lot of people are thinking those are the quarterbacks that could be kind of vaulting up the list and be the Colts' top options when we get to April. So, and the stats, Matt says 51 more days of quarterback arguments.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, it seems like an eternity before the NFL draft is here, but before we know it, it's going to be upon us. It gives us plenty of time to watch film. I actually dug in to another game of Anthony Richardson's this evening before we went live here, before I kind of make my overall assessment of Anthony Richardson. David, good to see you, man. It's always going to be fun talking quarterbacks. Looks like Nico is in love with Anthony Richardson. Tom says, "What's up, guys? You do a great job. Appreciate you jumping on, Tom." He looks like he's an AR-15 guy as well. And Colts loyalist as a fan, is there an advantage to going to the combine? I mean, I guess you get to see the guys up close. I don't think necessarily it's imperative to go to the combine. NFL Network does an incredible job of capturing everything there live, but it is kind of cool. It is kind of interesting to see how those guys move up close and really get to see, I guess, the power or how they run on that field. So, but before we get into all that, guys, we are less than 100 subscribers away from that magical 1,000 mark. And actually, as I tell you guys to go follow all the things, I'm going to tell you how many exactly we need, just so that way maybe we can get there tonight. I don't know about that, but hey, if you haven't already, go ahead and give us a follow. Since we're at 913 subscribers, only need 87 more. Go ahead and like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook. Go ahead and follow at Colts on FN on Twitter, and then subscribe to that YouTube channel. Hit the bell so you know whenever Drake and I are going live, Destin and Shad are going live, because we're going to be pumping out content, a lot of quarterback talk. And honestly, we've been talking about coaches and quarterbacks so much. Free agency literally starts next week. So we're going to be talking about that quite a bit as well. So make sure you go and give that a follow. But Drake, before we get sidetracked, let's just dive right into it. We're going to start with the guy who probably had the best combine performance out there, and we all kind of predicted that this was going to happen. He was going to steal the show just because of how incredible of an athlete he is. Anthony Richardson. I mean, he came in measured in at 6'4", 244 pounds, just a behemoth of a human. And then he just absolutely dominated with his athletic testing. What did you see in Richardson? You're number one guy in this class. And were you surprised by anything from what we saw on Saturday?
Obviously everybody knew he would athletically destroy, pretty much the broad jump and the vertical and the 40. But I didn't realize just how much he would destroy those respective areas. I think it was like a 10-foot broad jump, I
10
don't have the
10
numbers in.
10 9 10'9".
And then wasn't it a 10-foot just vertical standing jump?
It was a 40 and a half inch
Oh, my bad.
vertical.
Oh, my bad.
So
I didn't mean 10 foot, but
I mean, hey, he's not
that'd be
Superman out
insane.
there.
But that was quite surprising that he like snapped the combine records and everything like that. But what really blew me away was the pop on his throws. I really did like how just there was a lot of velocity behind the throws. They were on point for the most part. And his deep balls were absolutely beautiful. His arm strength, like I put here in my notes, it's second to none. But he did show he needs work with his feet. He also showed that he can miss throws still. There will be guys that'll be like this. They'll be like waving their arms, and you might get one or two that are going to sail over people's heads. So there's a lot of work to be done, but holy cow, he hit that combine field with a blaze.
Right. Courtney saying that are we ready for AR at number 4 overall? Very well could be.
Yep.
Tom, we'll get to Tom Williams' question in a second. I do want to talk about that. But Sarah, good to see that you're here. Anthony Richardson was so impressive. Love the kid. And I think a lot of people are really, really think the same way. Nomadic Brian Richardson rocked the boat. Impressive. And it's Wyatt Law. It would have been fun to see Chris Ballard's reactions to Richardson's performance. And I think as fans, it's always enticing to see an athlete go out there and perform well. But I think I don't want to take anything away from Anthony Richardson's performance, because it was unlike anything we've ever seen from the quarterback position. But I think we all knew going into this that he was just going to test incredibly well, because that's just the kind of athlete he is. If you've watched any Florida games last year, or you've grinded on some tape about this kid, it's just it's very, very impressive what he's able to do. At his size, being able to run a 4.43 40 is incredible. It really is. And I don't think there was anybody that really was knocking or questioning Anthony Richardson's athletic ability. I think if anything, if he wouldn't have knocked this athletic testing out of the park, it would have hurt him probably worse than any other quarterback in this draft class, because a lot of the hype surrounding Anthony Richardson and those that are talking about his ceiling is just because of his athletic ability to be able to run and use his big frame all over the field. But yeah, and then when we got to the throwing part of it, I don't. And here's the thing with these combine performances too. Chris Ballard even said it himself. It's hard to really take a lot from these throwing performance, or from these throwing sessions, because they're going up against air. They're not throwing against the live defense. They're throwing to receivers that they haven't really thrown to before. And so how much can you really take? But Drake, as I was talking to you on Saturday, I was telling you kind of what I was wanting to look for, watching the footwork, watching how the ball comes out of their hands, seeing how they handle the spotlight kind of thing. And I think Anthony Richardson I think he did it about as well as I thought he was going to do. He definitely has some areas to clean up with his footwork. The ball definitely does fly out of his hands. He has a howitzer for an arm there, and I think they clocked him at that speed test. He threw the ball, I think, he clocked at 60 miles per hour, just like 1 mile per hour above what CJ Stroud hit. But you can see the inconsistencies in his mechanics. I mean, there were definitely a lot of balls that maybe were in the vicinity of the wide receiver, but they weren't exactly placed. I wouldn't say it was a ball placement specialist, as one of the quarterbacks in this class likes to describe himself as. But you could see that there is still quite a ways to go as far as Anthony Richardson being considered an accurate quarterback, and then being able to do it on a consistent basis.
Well, and it's to the point where that's where you get you might need to sit him for a year, is because he does need to learn a lot of those throwing mechanics. I mean, he barely played in college, barely played, seriously. And like you said, if he clocks in, let's say hypothetically, like even a 4, like Newton did, 4.6. Let's say he clocks in at 4.6. Let's say he, has like a a 38, 39-inch broad jump, even just a little bit less than what he had, I mean, you're going to start getting questions because his mechanics need so much work. You had to knock out the athletic testing. And so that's where I wasn't really looking, because I figured he would, kind of like you said. And I don't think a lot of people were surprised, maybe at the 4.43 timing, but absolutely the footwork, the ball placement. Is he going to be able to put that ball right in the corner of the end zone where only your receiver can get it? Probably not right now. So I mean,
No.
you're gonna need to put him in a run heavy offense, probably with a lot of play action where he can use his legs.
Right. And Stats Matt says McAfee showed it today. Well, he wasn't perfect. Some of the wide receivers weren't exactly following the cones. I mean,
It's open air though.
it does, it's open air, and it doesn't really matter if they're following the cones. There's not going to be cones out there on game day. So the quarterbacks aren't exactly looking at the cones. On those, they're kind of looking at where the wide receiver is. Chad, good to see you always. And then, as Rich Wheeler says, I love this. Don't call Anthony Richardson a project. Yeah, he didn't really like that when James Boyd, a good friend of mine from the Athletic, kind of said that some people had called him a project label. And he said he had never heard that before. I mean, come on, Anthony Richardson. You've heard people call you a project before, but
confidence, but he is.
Yeah, exactly. I think he did say he had a lot of confidence out there. And Stats, Matt, I hadn't got to this comment yet, but not saying Richardson was perfect by any means, but every wide receiver is running routes, different depths and different speed, and that's why it's hard to take. And again, it's hard to take a lot of what these guys did in the throwing session very serious. I mean, not very seriously, because I mean, we're going to talk about CJ Stroud, who absolutely dominated it, but I'm not going to knock a guy if they're not exactly perfect in this throwing session, because when you look at the film, that's really what matters, when you see what these guys do on film. Now, do I think that a lot of what I've seen on film from Anthony Richardson backed up what I saw on the field on Saturday? Absolutely. Like I said, inconsistent with his mechanics, got a great arm, has a ton of potential, but it's just those inconsistencies with the accuracies and some of the misses. I wouldn't say were concerning, but they're just definitely not there yet. So I think it's going to be interesting to see if he can, how quickly he can develop, whether it's with the Colts or whether it's with somebody else, how quickly those mechanics can develop, whether he sits, whether that team plays him right away. I think either way, it's going to be crucial that he goes to a staff that is fully invested on taking their time to develop Anthony Richardson. And I know a lot of people say that he might not be ready, but let's just give him a year. I think it's going to be more than that, because I'm not saying he's going to be the rawest of raw coming in. I don't believe that either, but I do think that it is going to take some time, because a lot of times when you're teaching mechanics, unless it's perfect, and I was talking to you about this on Saturday too, when things get muddied and when things aren't exactly perfect, a lot of times guys revert back to poor mechanics and revert to what they have been doing. And I could see that in a sense with Anthony Richardson. When he does start to get pressured, he very well could revert to his old ways. And that could be a real concern moving forward.
Well, and again, it's the experience. You're putting the bad look. I'm a huge Anthony Richardson guy, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, it's glaringly obvious that there is so much work to be done with the throw. It's a little bit of a wind up kind of thing, where it's like, if you don't get that out quickly and pop it from the shoulder and the chest, I mean, you might get sacked. You might, throw a duck straight up in the air. And like Ballard has even said, is that usually when the going gets tough in the pocket like that, you do revert back to your arm. You revert back to your feet, and you might not be in a position to do either one of those things, but you might try them anyway. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that is absolutely true. It could take 2 seasons, one of sitting and one of, very careful, kind of like transitioning into the offense.
Right. And it's Colts Loyalist has a good question. Did you hear any nuggets about the quarterback interviews? So from everything I've heard, really there were no concerns as far as the interviews go with any of the top four: Richardson, Stroud, Bryce Young, or Will Levis. All of them did fairly well. They were all personable. They're all very good guys, very good character. I will say this for the people that are asking who the Colts interviewed and who they didn't, that isn't really known out to the public. The one thing I do know is number one, eventually, they will meet with all of these prospects. But Anthony Richardson, the Colts did not have a formal sit down interview with Anthony Richardson at the combine. They had an informal meeting with Anthony Richardson, and Anthony Richardson confirmed this today on Rich Eisen's show of what I had been hearing. But as far as a formal interview, Anthony Richardson and the Colts have not had that yet. So we'll see what happens down the line. But Drake, let's kind of talk about the next guy that we talked about. Anthony Richardson dominating in the athletics, the athletic testing. This guy really dominated when it was time to throw the football. And that's CJ Stroud, my number one quarterback in this draft class. And really, this is what I expected as well. I expected CJ Stroud to come out here and absolutely dominate this, no matter what wide receiver he was throwing it to. Because you look at how CJ Stroud throws the football. Great mechanics, probably the most natural and most gifted passer in this entire class, and I think he backed that out. What did you see on CJ Stroud there on Saturday, and what did you come away thinking about the Ohio State quarterback?
I saw nearly every ball thrown perfectly. I saw fantastic footwork. Almost nothing was wrong with it. Whether it was a short route, breaking route, in route, slant, out, didn't matter. Deep route, he just seemed to not have any issues at all. Like you said, his velocity is just a hair shorter than Richardson's. And while he didn't, blow your mind like Richardson did in the 40 or like he did in the physical areas, he didn't have really anything that you can scoff at either. Like, it's really hard to look at anything he did in the combine and say, oh man, dude, a lot of stuff to work on here. The only thing that I did want to see, and I'm sad I didn't get to, is I wanted to see both him and Levis, in all fairness, run the 40-yard dash. Richardson was the only one of the four that did, because Young looked like a kid in a backpack the entire time, just like hanging out with the players. But yeah, that's the only thing. I mean, I tried to kind of find something wrong. I mean, he missed. You know what? He missed a throw, Andrew. All right, he missed a throw. What a jerk! But
right.
No, he looked, at the end of the day, he looked smooth as hell with everything he was doing.
I mean, I couldn't help but every time Stroud would throw the ball, I'd look over and just kind of get a smirk on my face when we were sitting there watching. That chef's kiss, But I mean, again, this is kind of what I expected, because it's routes against air. CJ Stroud, when the pocket's clean and everything's good around him, he showed time and again on film that was when he absolutely dominated the entire college football landscape. It's going to be different again when these guys are in a live setting, when they've got defenders around their ankles. CJ Stroud did show that he can do it against Georgia, and he, to an extent, against Michigan, as Miguel says here. As Daniel Jeremiah liked to say, he can do it once, he can do it. That it's about developing that part of his game. CJ being able to do it in the Georgia game shows he has that ability. Colts loyalist saying CJ is a sniper. Sarah saying that give me Stroud all day. I absolutely love him, and I'm an Iowa Hawkeye fan. He dominated us. We had a top 10 defense, and he shares a birthday with you. Well, hey, maybe the next Colts quarterback will share a birthday. Well, you guys can celebrate together, Sarah. But yeah, I think if CJ Stroud would have came out and performed flat, or even kind of, and I don't want to make this sound like I'm dogging Anthony Richardson, but kind of performed at the same level of Anthony Richardson, and by that I mean inconsistent mechanics, ball placement wasn't exactly on. I think CJ Stroud, we'd be talking like, well, what does this guy bring to the table? Because this is supposedly his best asset. But for him to go out there to show the level of touch, to show the ball placement, because like he said all week, he views himself as a ball placement specialist. He doesn't want his wide receivers to go out there and work to catch the ball. He wants to put it in a place where the wideouts can catch it and immediately turn up field and try to get extra yardage. But it's hard to kind of go and look at that session and not come away thinking, man, just CJ Stroud throws the most beautiful ball in this draft class. And I kept showing you his footwork, and that's what we talked about. His footwork had that solid base the whole time. His heels weren't clicking together. He always was able to set the hallway and be able to kind of get lined up with his receiver, which again I thought was very impressive, because most of these guys besides Jackson Smith and Jigba, he's never thrown to before. So that was also a very impressive part as well. And he had Lucas Oil Stadium buzzing every time he came up and was throwing the football.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's very clear that what the Colts lacked, I mean, outside of any stability, coaching, offensive line rotations, quarterback rotations, whatever, is there was bad accuracy, there was like bad release time, there was two aging guys that may have just fallen clean off the cliff, and a backup who wasn't really ready to start. So can you imagine a guy who places the ball like that? If Stroud can just continue to build on that accuracy, you got a guy like Alec Pierce, you got a guy like Michael Pittman Jr., you have a guy that if he gets re-signed like Paris Campbell, you have Jonathan Taylor. You have a seriously talented team around you. Jelani Woods, are you kidding me? He's going to anything within 10 feet of the guy seems to be grabbed. So it's like, I mean, that could really be a kind of like Charles Davis said that, or no, it was Daniel Jeremiah said that, with Richardson, with Levis, you might have to wait a year, but you're going to get a super high ceiling guy potentially. But really with Young and Stroud, you can pretty much plug him into any offense and really hit the ground running potentially right out of the gate. Just
Right. I 100% agree there. Nadine says Raiders or Panthers trading up for Bryce and Stroud going to Houston. I'm actually going to push back on that, and I'll tell you why. Because I think there's actually zero chance CJ Stroud goes to the Houston Texans, and the reason for that is because, do you know who CJ Stroud's agent is? David Mulligetta. David Mulligetta is the agent for Deshaun Watson. Because of that, CJ Stroud, David Mulligetta do not want to have anything to do with the Houston Texans. They've gone down that road before. The relationship with him and his agent is not good. Stroud and his agent have pretty much written off the Houston Texans as a team, and they will not go there. Though CJ Stroud already said which is kind of known that this wasn't going to happen anyway, but he doesn't want to go to the Chicago Bears because one of his best friends, Justin Fields, is there. That is his team. So that does eliminate some of the guys in the top five. If I would have to say, Houston is probably the leader to get Bryce Young, whether they do trade up to 1 and get him, whether Young falls down to 2. But I would say Houston is pretty much at this point all in on Bryce Young. So as Miguel says, how much do you guys think teams pay attention to how these guys act when they're not throwing, like even Young? I think they do. When they're watching these guys, they want to see their body language. They want to see how they are interacting with other players, interacting with coaches. Are they locked in? Are they focused? Or are they just goofing around? Are they on their phone texting? Are they not listening? All of that matters. Everything these guys do over these next few months is under a very, very intense microscope. And anytime they're in the public eye, and even when they're in private doing different things, they got to be on their P's and Q's.
I mean, you got to think Shane Steichen, who we actually got to see speak in Indianapolis the night before we went and saw the quarterbacks throw. He even said that when we're evaluating these guys, we go back and we talk to their high school coaches. We go back and we talk to they probably talk to everybody they can possibly speak with. How did they grow up? What are their ticks? What are their strengths? How are they emotionally, how do they handle, a adversity type of thing? I mean, they are constantly in the eye of these teams because you're building your entire franchise's future. Okay. The Colts' franchise is at stake here because if they somehow do not nail this draft, it could be really, really bad. I mean, you have 5 years of constant rotations followed by a busted draft. I mean, they have to nail this. So they're not going to leave any stone, I promise you, even the smallest of pebbles unturned on these guys.
Right, Rich Wheeler, and I'm just putting this up here so I can promote my narrative. Saying Steichen CJ looked the most serious or obsessed about his craft. I think both him and Anthony Richardson were absolutely locked in, and Will Levis for that matter. All the guys that threw, and we're talking about Stroud and Richardson, and we're not really talking much about Levis, but Levis was locked in and he did show off that cannon. I do want to give him credit for that, but I just think the Colts level of interest in Levis is kind of a tick lower than it is with Stroud and Anthony Richardson. And I think this kind of sums it up. What Stats Matt says, really won't complain about either one. I think both of them did an outstanding job. Both of them needed to come in and do what they needed to do in order to capitalize on the combine process. And I think both of them came out of the NFL combine looking better for it. And probably, I don't know if it's skyrocketing their stock, but their stock certainly didn't get hurt by what happened this weekend.
Well, and as soon as Richardson started doing his thing and Stroud started doing his thing, you started hearing about, well, could Richardson potentially go to the Raiders? Could Reich, who, by the way, was right there in the building, very familiar with the place, he was watching Richardson too. Could they have to really make a move? If they want Richardson, they got to go from 9 all the way to 1, 2, 3, whatever. So I think that it did, to a degree, increase their stock. I also think that they nailed what they were supposed to, and I would have liked to see CJ Stroud run the 40-yard dash, and I would have liked to see Anthony Richardson place some throws a little bit more on target. So
right, I guess
there's a little bit left to be desired.
That just gives us another opportunity and more of an excuse to watch their pro days when these guys will be running and doing those jobs. But yeah, I mean, the Panthers. It's been reported by a couple national reporters now that the Panthers are looking to be aggressive as they go and maybe trade up for a quarterback. That's certainly something that's going to have to be monitored. It's also going to have to be monitored. Do the Bears want to fall all the way down to 9 and possibly skip out on one of those high draft guys like a Will Anderson or a Tyree Wilson? We'll see what happens with Jalen Carter and his legal issues, but I think it'll all depend. It's all going to depend on that package. But Drake, to kind of close this out, I do want to ask this question. What are the Colts thinking right now? I think it's a lot of. I think it's what a lot of people are kind of wondering where Indianapolis's head at, where Chris Ballard's head's at, where Shane Steichen's head is at, and kind of what direction they're leaning. So I'm going to ask 2 questions, and I want to know what you think the Colts are thinking right now, and what do you think the likelihood is that the Colts are going to have to or will trade up to go get their quarterback here in April?
I think that they're thinking their heads are legitimately spinning, but at the same time, I mean, because look, everybody was like, well, Young and Levis at first, and then it was like Young, Levis, and Stroud. No way they're going to take a chance on Richardson. Well, after that combine, it is securely, in my opinion, Stroud and Richardson. Those are the 2 guys. So I think if you're Ballard, you have to think to yourself, am I willing to put myself on the line for Anthony Richardson, or is my job going to be more secure with CJ Stroud? And if you're Shane Steichen, I think that your mind is going back to your past experiences. I think that Stroud is like Herbert in his experience, and definitely Hurts is more like Richardson, only a larger, more like a quicker version. I mean, so you really need to kind of dive into your experiences there. But what was the second question? I'm sorry. I got.
Do you think the Colts eventually will trade up, or do you think they will need to trade up in order to get, let's just say, to get Stroud or Richardson?
I do think that they will trade up to get one of those guys, but I don't think they're going to number 1 or 2. I think they're going to figure out a way to trade with Arizona to get that 3rd pick. That's my opinion.
Right. And Stats Matt says literally every Colts guy says the tiers are Stroud, Richardson, then Bryce, then Levis. And I was texting with Stats Matt this weekend. And we were kind of having that conversation, and I kind of just gave him a smirk emoji if we knew something. But yeah, I that's kind of where I have it. I think if I had to put my money down right now, I think after the night of April 27th, we will either be talking about CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson as the next quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. I don't think that the Colts have their draft board completely set already.
Yeah.
I think that's as Chris Ballard said, the cement is still drying until draft day. They're going to move that around. The pro days are going to be crucial. The interviews with these guys are going to be crucial. The top 30 visits, and really, when you think about it, Shane Steichen is still trying to kind of formulate his own opinion on these guys because his head has been swirling since he got to Indianapolis. And really, the only thing he's been able to do is kind of formulate a staff of his own. He hasn't even been able to really dive in into all of these quarterback prospects. But I do think that they probably need to kind of figure that out sooner rather than later, because you don't want to be kind of taking your time on all this and then you end up getting jumped by a lot of teams. Do I think that I've seen a lot of people saying that there's going to be trades for the top 3 picks? I mean, that would be unprecedented to happen.
Yeah, no. If
there was a trade, if a team traded up to 1, there was another trade for 2 and another trade for 3. I really don't see that happening, especially in a quarterback class that there's not even one surefire guy, let alone two or 3. I think if it was my best guess, I would say this is what's going to happen. I would say that Houston trades up to 1 with Chicago and takes Bryce Young. Then I think that the Bears will end up staying put at 2 and taking Will Anderson. And then I think the Colts will probably end up trading up to 3 with Arizona, so that way nobody can jump in front of them. And then I think they will end up taking CJ Stroud with that pick. I could be wrong. Again, we will see in a couple weeks. There could be a trade that happens tomorrow that screws my entire plan. But I think that's what's going to end up happening once we get to April. I don't think that we're going to see. I mean, I think the Panthers will be aggressive, but I don't think that we're going to see the Bears want to drop back that far unless the Panthers want to literally mortgage their entire future and give 3 first-round picks to do that. I mean, if that happens, by all means, go for it. I don't think there's any quarterback in this class worth that amount of draft capital to really go up and grab that. So, and as Stats Matt has said, quarterbacks have never gone 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't see it happening this year either, especially with this group where you've got four really solid guys that could all turn into something. But like we've said, there is no Andrew Luck. There is no Joe Burrow. There is no Trevor Lawrence in this draft class, or even really close to that level that guys are going to be trying to run up and get.
You know what? I wanted to see if you remembered, because I'm trying to remember myself, but here for everyone listening is the reason why the Colts are not going to trade with the Bears for the number 1 pick. I mean, we heard it when we were at the Combine, what it would look like. And I believe it was first rounder. Obviously you get the 4th pick now, but then you get, I think, the 2nd rounder. And then you also get next year's first rounder. I mean, it was just something absolutely unprecedented that for someone who really, really was aggressive, like a GM that's like, I got to go get that guy. Maybe, but even Ballard, as much as he needs a quarterback, I just don't see him giving away his next couple of drafts, given just how important this season is to his career with the Colts.
Right. And Tom Williams right here says, I would not give up what the Bears are supposedly asking for that number 1 pick. A lot of what I think what a lot of the Bears are doing is trying to drive up that price through the media. I mean, if you look at Ryan Poles, what he said to Peter King, what he said to Albert Breer, the Bears are talking to any media outlet that will listen right now. There's a reason for that. They're trying to drive this price up as quickly as possible. They're trying to say it could get done soon. They're trying to get everybody to bring to try to put in and put in their best offers as soon as possible, because that's what the Bears want to do. They want to really try to capitalize on it before the quarterback market kind of gets all figured out. But I just don't see that high of a price being paid. Could be wrong. I mean, nothing surprises me in the NFL anymore. But I'm gonna want to wait and see it before I believe it. So, as Stats Matt was asking here, are we going to talk about the home run special teams coach hire? Yes, buddy. You just need to calm down a little bit. We're moving it on to the latest Colts news and rumors here, and the first one on the docket is the special teams coordinator hire. So Colts are reportedly hiring former Notre Dame special teams coordinator Brian Mason as their new special teams coordinator. So Brian Mason did a phenomenal job with Notre Dame last year. I think Notre Dame's special teams unit ranked 6th in the entire country, had 7 block punts all year. And Brian Mason was only with Notre Dame for 1 season, but before that, he spent the prior 4 years as the special teams coordinator at the University of Cincinnati. Drake, we kind of saw this break on Saturday morning. Give me your thoughts on Brian Mason as the new special teams coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts.
Well, it's a really good hire. I think that it's somebody who's going to come in with a lot of fire, a lot of energy, and with what he did at Notre Dame, I don't know how many schools are considered in the Division One rankings, but 6 out of 32 in the NFL, that's incredible. 6 out of, I believe it's like 140 schools. That is ridiculous. 7 blocked punts. I believe it's like 10 or 11 out of 10 or 11 games, and most of the time, blocked punts end in touchdowns. Okay, so this is an attitude that is exactly what the special teams needed in replacing Bubba Ventrone. I know that everyone's like, well, special teams, okay. It's not as easy as you'd think to replace, because a lot of guys who become starters down the road, they start on special teams. And so Bubba Ventrone campaigned for guys like Isaiah Rodgers. He campaigned for a lot of guys like Dallas Flowers.
Mm-hmm.
So these guys are important in developing future stars for the team. So I think it's a great hire, and plus a guy who just coached one of the better departments in the NCAA football realm.
Right. As Nomadic Brian says, go Brian. So you guys share a first name here, and I'm gonna highlight another one of Nomadic Brian's comments. Bears don't want a bear market. If you don't know what a bear market is, either go Google it or go open up an intro to economics textbook
TD
to kind of go. TD Ameritrade.
Go
Kind of go figure that out. Stats Matt said 7 block punts.
That's
exactly.
Insane.
And I think it's a good hire. If you haven't, if you need to kind of know what his coaching style is, he seems like he's a motivator. Our colleague Destin Adams tweeted out a video of him, I think it was on Saturday morning, of him coaching up Notre Dame special teams units. So go ahead and check that out because I think he's going to do a really good job. I think this is a very sneaky good hire. Again, he had some interest by other NFL teams, not just the Indianapolis Colts, but Brian Mason was born in Zionsville, grew up around the Indy area his entire life. This was his dream job, and I'm excited to see what he does with it. And I think Wyatt Law mentioned it. He said, we poached 2 Notre Dame coaches. We're going to talk about the second one here. So the Colts also reportedly hired a Notre Dame graduate assistant and assistant offensive line coach Chris Watt as their new assistant offensive line coach. So, and if you think that name sounds familiar, Chris Watt went to Notre Dame, played as an offensive guard from 2009 to 2013, spent a couple years in the NFL, even with the at the then San Diego Chargers. But he's been into coaching. He was only at he was there with Notre Dame for a couple seasons for 2020 into 2021 before he went to Tulane. Then he came back and was spent another season under former offensive line coach Harry Highstand at Notre Dame. And if you know Harry Highstand, that is a legendary offensive line coach there with the Fighting Irish. So Drake, what do you think about this hire? I know we were talking about it a little bit before the episode. How big of an impact do you think Chris Watt is going to have on a Colts offensive line that desperately needs to rebound in 2023?
Well, I think it's yet another young hire. I think it's on the younger end of things, under 40 or around 40 type of hire. Outside of Gus Bradley, and I believe the running backs coach, it's slipping my mind right now, his name.
DeAndre
Um,
Smith.
yeah, it's like outside of those two, you are on the younger end of things. And, you have Quentin Nelson there that was a Notre Dame guy, and he, was there with Harry. And so it's like you need to help get the captain of that offensive line back to his form. I think that this is a great addition. I think he's going to complement Sperano Jr. really well. It looks like Steichen is really campaigning for the younger end of staff so that these guys can relate more to the players and they can help them develop.
Right. It does. Most of the staff is a lot of young guys. I mean, you thinking outside of Gus Bradley, DeAndre Smith. You're talking about guys that are in their 30s and 40s, and that could be what this team needs. I mean, certainly Richard Smith and Ron Milas on the defensive side are a little bit older as well, but a lot of the
Yeah.
offensive coaches are younger. They seem to be more fiery type of coaches than the last regime, and maybe that's exactly what this team needs, a completely new approach, a completely new kind of mentality within that locker room. But everything you hear about these guys, it's one big thing, and it's most of the time when you hear either Shane Steichen or other people describing these head coaches, they're going to hold guys accountable. And I think that is something that Shane Steichen, Chris Ballard really wants to see from this new coaching staff. And I think the players are welcoming it as well, considering how most of them said that was probably the number one thing that they liked about Jeff Saturday, was that he held guys accountable, got on them a little bit, and wasn't afraid to get on the best players. So I think you're really going to see this locker room really embrace that. Again, all new, a lot of new coaches, a lot of young coaches. So we're going to have to give them time. Not going to say it's the best coaching staff I've ever seen by any means, but it's definitely a new voice, a new type of coach that's coming into the locker room, and I think that this locker room and these players are going to respond pretty well to that.
I absolutely agree, and because I know it's getting kind of close to the end of the episode, there was a comment I wanted to address from Matt Roberts. It just basically, it's a really good question. He says, "Wouldn't that be the reason Ballard wouldn't mortgage the future, or would mortgage the future, because this season matters so much, not the opposite?" That's a fine line in his situation, because yes, that makes sense, but Stroud, Richardson, Levis, Young, it does not matter. They're probably kind of like Stats Matt actually puts down there, probably not going to have all the success in that first year. So you can't just give away the 24, the 25 first round picks, or whatever incredible price Chicago's asking. Because if for some reason, let's say hypothetically, they get one of these four guys and they go 10-7, somehow get to the playoffs, well, then you're losing out next year. Then you're losing out the year after that. So you really have to play a fine line. I just don't think he's going to go for the number 1 or 2 pick.
Unless they really believe that and have a strong conviction that they found the guy, and we have yet to see that. Again, it's the beginning of March. Will they know that in time before the pick is already traded? We'll see. But I can tell everybody this, and we'll kind of end the show on this note. As of right now, the Indianapolis Colts have not been one of the teams that have engaged the Chicago Bears on the first overall pick. Because will that change? Very well could be.
Yeah,
but as of right now, the Colts have not engaged in talks with the Chicago Bears to trade up to number 1. So we'll have to see what happens there. But that's our show for tonight, guys. Really hoped you all enjoyed it. It was fun talking about these quarterbacks. Colts loyalists, Tom Williams, Wyatt Law, Courtney, Nomadic Brian, Stats Matt, Sarah, Miguel, Rich Wheeler, all of you guys, Matt Roberts, all of you guys were just absolutely fantastic tonight. If you haven't done so already, please go ahead, and as the ticker's going, again, we're less than 100 subscribers away from that 1,000 mark. And all the fun things are going to happen once we hit 1,000. So go ahead and like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook. Go ahead and follow at Colts on FN on Twitter. Subscribe to the YouTube and hit that notification bell so you know when Drake and I are going live, whenever Destin and Shot are going live, whenever there's breaking news that we're going to be going live, because a lot's going to happen over these next couple months. So before we get out of here, Drake, what are some of the things that you've been writing and putting up onto horseshoehuddle.com? People, go and read his stuff.
Well, real quick, the 6 wide receiver prospects the Colts should look into in the draft after me and Andrew went to the combine. There's 5 that I think could happen and 1 super duper dark horse. And then helping a rookie quarterback, I'm doing a series on each offensive lineman, and I just did one on Raymond tomorrow, Nelson.
Awesome. Yeah, that piece on Raymond was fantastic. So go ahead and check that out. I did a piece that came out this morning, kind of diving in what exactly the Colts were impressed about Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud, with Shane Steichen, Jim Bob Cooter, and Cam Turner all there in person watching those guys. So definitely check that out. And guys, my first mock draft of the season is dropping Wednesday morning. We're going to have some trades in there, and we're going to have some interesting picks. So you'll definitely want to check that out Wednesday morning on horseshoehuddle.com. Go follow Drake at DWalsterDrake. You can follow me at Andrew Moore NFL, and we'll be back on Thursday night to talk about free agency, something that we haven't done yet, but it's right around the corner. So until then, have a good one, and go watch some quarterback film. We'll see you guys.